Sophie had always been a bit of a recluse. Even as a child, she preferred the company of her books and her thoughts to the noisy chaos of her peers. But as she grew older, her reclusive tendencies intensified. She stopped answering her phone, stopped opening her mail, and stopped leaving her apartment altogether. At first, her family and friends thought she was just going through a phase. But as months turned into years, they grew increasingly worried. They tried calling, texting, and even showing up at her door, but Sophie refused to let anyone in. Eventually, her family became so concerned that they hired a private investigator to check on her. What he found was both shocking and disturbing. Sophie's apartment was cluttered with piles of junk, old newspapers, and empty food containers. The investigator had to navigate his way through narrow pathways just to get to Sophie's bedroom, where he found her lying in bed, surrounded by piles of clothing and debris. Sophie was suffering from Diogenes Syndrome, a disorder that causes people to accumulate and hoard excessive amounts of possessions, often to the point of creating a living space that is both unsanitary and unsafe. The cause of Diogenes Syndrome is not entirely clear. Some researchers believe it is a form of obsessive-compulsive disorder, while others think it may be related to a traumatic event or a history of social isolation. Whatever the cause, it is clear that Diogenes Syndrome can have a profound impact on a person's life. In Sophie's case, it had caused her to become completely isolated from the outside world and to live in conditions that were not only unsanitary, but also potentially dangerous. Sophie's family knew they needed to get her help, but they weren't sure where to turn. They contacted a local social worker who had experience working with people who suffered from hoarding disorders, and she recommended they start by contacting a therapist who specialized in OCD and anxiety disorders. The therapist they found was patient, compassionate, and experienced. She recognized that Sophie's Diogenes Syndrome was not just about the accumulation of possessions, but also about a deep-rooted fear of letting go. Over the course of several months, the therapist worked with Sophie to develop a plan for cleaning up her apartment and letting go of the items she no longer needed. They started small, focusing on one area at a time, and gradually worked their way through the clutter. At first, Sophie was resistant to the idea of getting rid of anything. She was attached to every item in her apartment, and the thought of parting with even a single object caused her immense anxiety. But as she worked with the therapist and saw the progress they were making, Sophie began to realize that letting go of the excess clutter was actually liberating. She started to feel lighter, freer, and more in control of her life. The therapist also helped Sophie develop strategies for managing her anxiety and staying on top of her cleaning and organization. They worked on mindfulness exercises, breathing techniques, and other relaxation techniques that helped Sophie stay calm and focused during the cleaning process. Eventually, after months of hard work, Sophie's apartment was transformed. The piles of junk were gone. The floors were clean and the air smelled fresh. Sophie's family and friends were amazed at the transformation and were grateful to see their loved one healthy, happy, and in control of her life. Today, Sophie is still a bit of a recluse, but she is much happier and healthier than she was before. She is still working with her therapist to manage her anxiety and maintain her clean and organized living space, but she has come a long way from the isolated and cluttered life she once led.